I still remember the exact shade of ivory in my mother's wedding dress when I found it in the attic. Not white, ivory. There's a difference, though most people don't notice. White is pure, untouched, like fresh snow on a field no one has walked across yet. Ivory carries warmth, like it's already lived a little, like it's held secrets close to its threads and absorbed the sunlight of years gone by. I was 17 when I pulled that dress from its garment bag, and the scent that rose from the fabric wasn't perfume or mothballs. It was something older. Something like secrets kept in silk, like time itself had been folded into those careful seams. My name is Clara, and for most of my life I believed my mother was a saint. She had that effect on people, the kind of woman who could walk into a room and make everyone feel both comforted and slightly unworthy. She baked bread every Sunday, the kind that filled our entire house with the smell of yeast and warmth, the kind that made neighbours pause on their evening walks just to breathe it in. She kept fresh flowers on the kitchen table even in winter, even when money was tight and my father worked double shifts at the plant. She'd find away wildflowers from the roadside in summer, evergreen branches with red berries in December, even a single stem in a mason jar that somehow made our kitchen feel like a sanctuary. She sang hymns while washing dishes, her voice soft and clear like water over stones, like something from another era when people still believed songs could hold prayers. When she looked at my father, her eyes held something I thought was pure devotion, the kind of love they write about in books, the kind that seemed effortless and eternal. I would watch them sometimes, the way she'd touch his shoulder as she passed behind his chair at dinner, the way he'd look up from his newspaper and smile at her for no reason at all. They had their own language, made of small gestures and comfortable silences. It was the kind of love that made me believe in soulmates, in destiny, in the idea that somewhere out there, everyone has a person who fits them perfectly. I wanted to be exactly like her. I practiced her mannerisms in the mirror, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was concentrating, the way she tilted her head when she listened to someone talk, really listened. I tried to bake bread like she did, though mine always came out dense and hard. I picked wildflowers and put them in mason jars, though they never looked quite as effortless as hers did. I wanted to grow up and find a love like she had found, solid and unwavering and beautiful in its simplicity. But that afternoon in the attic, with dust motes floating through the single window like tiny planets in slow orbit, with the afternoon sun slanting golden through the glass and illuminating years of accumulated boxes and forgotten things, I found something tucked into the bodice of that ivory dress. An envelope. Old, yellowed at the edges like pages in antique books with handwriting I didn't recognize. The letters were elegant, slanted, written with care and precision. The ink was faded blue, the kind that comes from fountain pens nobody uses anymore, the kind that bleeds slightly into paper and speaks of a different generation. I shouldn't have read it. I knew that even as my fingers were sliding the letter out, even as my eyes were scanning the first line, even as some voice in the back of my mind was screaming that this was a violation, that some things are meant to stay hidden. But I was 17, and 17-year-olds are creatures of curiosity and consequence. We touch the hot stove to see if it really burns. We read the letters we know we shouldn't read. My darling Rose, that was my mother's name, though nobody called her that anymore. She'd gone by her middle name Marie for as long as I could remember. I'd seen Rose Marie on official documents, on her driver's license, on the marriage certificate I'd found once when I was looking for my birth certificate in the filing cabinet. But to everyone, to my father, to her friends, to me and Marcus, she was just simply, completely Marie. I know you're getting married tomorrow, and I know I have no right to say this now. I've given up that right through my own foolishness, through my own inability to be what you needed when you needed it. But I can't let you walk down that aisle without telling you the truth. I never stopped loving you. What happened between us wasn't a mistake, no matter what you've convinced yourself. It was the only real thing I've ever felt. You were the only real thing. Tomorrow you'll marry Thomas, and I know he's a good man. I know he'll provide for you, protect you, give you the stable life you've always said you wanted. But Rose, my beautiful Rose, Will that be enough? Will you wake up in 20 years and wonder what could have been? Will you think of me? Because I know I'll think of you. Every day, for the rest of my life, I'll think of you. I'm not asking you to run away with me. I know I don't deserve that. No, I've lost my chance. I just needed you to know that what we had was real, that I was real, even if I couldn't figure out how to be real in the way you needed. I hope he makes you happy, Rose. God, I hope he makes you happy. But if he doesn't, if you ever need anything, I'll be waiting. I'll always be waiting. All my love, all my regret, James. My hands started shaking before I even finished reading. The paper trembled between my fingers, and I had to read certain lines 2 or 3 times because my brain couldn't quite process what it was seeing. This letter, this confession, this plea, had been tucked into my mother's wedding dress for 23 years. 23 years of anniversaries and birthday cakes and Sunday bread and fresh flowers. 23 years of my father kissing the top of her head in the kitchen. 23 years of what I thought was the kind of love that novels try to capture and never quite can. And all that time, this letter had been here, hidden in ivory fabric, waiting like a time bomb that nobody knew was ticking. I sat there on the attic floor for what felt like hours, though it couldn't have been more than 20 minutes. The afternoon light shifted, turning golden, then amber, then grey. Dust continued its slow dance through the air, unconcerned with the small catastrophe unfolding in my 17-year-old heart. Downstairs, I could hear my mother moving around in the kitchen, probably starting dinner. The sound of her footsteps was so familiar, so ordinary. The same footsteps that had walked me to school on my first day, holding my hand and telling me I was brave. The same footsteps that had paced the hallway when I had pneumonia at age 10, staying awake all night to check my fever. The same footsteps that had danced with my father in the living room on their anniversary every year, to the same song they danced to at their wedding. The Way You Look Tonight. The same footsteps that had walked down an aisle toward one man while loving another. Or had she loved James? The letter said he loved her, used the present tense like it was something that transcended time and circumstance. But what had she felt? Had she loved him back, or had he been some romantic disaster she'd escaped? Had she kept this letter as a reminder of a mistake avoided, or as a memorial to something she'd sacrificed? I folded the letter carefully, my hands still shaking, put it back in the envelope and tucked it into my pocket. Then I hung the dress back in its garment bag with trembling fingers, zipped it closed and climbed down the attic stairs. Each step felt strange, like I was walking through water, like the world had shifted slightly on its axis and I hadn't quite adjusted to the new gravity. When I walked into the kitchen, my mother was humming, something soft and wordless, while she chopped vegetables for soup. She was wearing her usual house clothes, an old cardigan over a simple dress, her hair pulled back in a loose bun. She looked exactly like she always looked, like nothing had changed, like the world was still the same solid thing it had been that morning. "There you are," she said, smiling at me over her shoulder. Her smile was warm, genuine, exactly like always. I was starting to wonder if you'd gotten lost up there." "Just looking through old things," I said. My voice sounded normal. I was surprised by that, surprised that I could speak at all, that words could come out sounding ordinary when everything inside me was chaos. "Find anything interesting?" I could have told her right then. I could have pulled the envelope from my pocket, placed it on the cutting board next to the carrots and celery, and asked her who James was, what he'd meant to her, why she'd kept his letter hidden in her wedding dress for 23 years. The words were right there, hovering on my tongue, ready to spill out and change everything. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the way the evening light was falling through the window, catching in her hair and illuminating the silver threads that had appeared in the last few years. Or maybe it was the way she looked so at peace, so content in this ordinary moment of making soup for her family. Or maybe it was fear that if I asked, she'd tell me the truth, and the truth would crack open the foundation of everything I thought I knew about love and marriage and who my mother really was. So instead I said, "Just old photo albums. You and Dad looked so young." She laughed, the sound light and musical. We were babies. I was only 21. Can you imagine? 21 years old and thinking I knew everything about the world. I couldn't, actually. I was 17 and 21 seemed impossibly far away, but also impossibly close. In 4 years, I'd be the age my mother was when she got married. In 4 years, would I know enough about love and life to make that kind of decision? Did you ever have doubts? I asked. The question came out before I could stop it, before I could think about whether it sounded suspicious. Before the wedding? She paused mid-chop, the knife hovering over a carrot. For a moment, I thought I'd gone too far, that she'd somehow know I'd found the letter, that mothers have some kind of sixth sense about these things. But then she set the knife down and turned to look at me fully, wiping her hands on her apron. Everyone has doubts, she said quietly. That's part of being human, part of making any big decision. Anyone who says they got married without a single doubt is either lying or wasn't paying attention. But you married him anyway. I did. She picked up the knife again, resumed chopping, but slower now, more thoughtful. And I've never regretted it, not for a single day. The words should have comforted me. They should have erased the letter from my mind, should have proven that whatever James was, he was nothing compared to what she had with my father. Instead, they felt like stones dropping into deep water, heavy, sinking, leaving only ripples on the surface while the truth remained hidden in the depths below. How did you know? I pressed. How did you know Dad was the right one? She was quiet for a long moment, considering the question. Outside, I could hear a car passing, a dog barking in the distance, the ordinary sounds of our neighbourhood settling into evening. I don't know if anyone ever really knows, she finally said. Not with absolute certainty. Love isn't like math where you can check your work and prove the answer is correct. It's more like faith. You make the best choice you can with the information you have, and then you choose to believe in it every day after. That sounds scary. She smiled. It is, but it's also beautiful. There's freedom in accepting that nothing is certain, that we're all just doing our best. She went back to her soup, and I went up to my room, the letter burning a hole in my pocket. I didn't tell anyone about the letter. Not my best friend, Sarah, who I told everything to, about the boy I liked in English class, about the fight I'd had with Marcus about borrowing his car, about the college applications that were keeping me up at night. Sarah and I had been friends since 3rd grade, when she'd shared her lunch with me after I'd dropped mine in a puddle. We'd made a pact to tell each other everything, sealed with a pinky promise and the kind of solemnity only 8-year-olds can muster. But I didn't tell her about this. Not my older brother Marcus, who was home from college for the summer and would have probably laughed and said, Mom was human, so what? Marcus was practical like that, saw the world in shades of grey instead of black and white. He would have shrugged and said, everyone has a past, and he would have been right. But somehow that felt too dismissive, too simple for the complexity of what I'd found. Not even my father, though sometimes I'd catch myself staring at him during dinner, wondering if he knew. If he'd always known, if there were secrets between them that they'd agreed never to discuss, old wounds they'd bandaged over and agreed to leave undisturbed. The letter became a weight I carried alone, tucked into my nightstand drawer, then moved to a shoebox under my bed, then finally to the bottom of my backpack, where I could feel its presence even when I was at school. It was like carrying a stone in my pocket, small enough not to burden me physically, heavy enough that I was always aware of it. I started watching my parents differently, looking for cracks, for signs that their marriage was built on something fragile, for evidence that my mother was secretly unhappy or that my father was secretly oblivious. I studied them like a detective looking for clues, analysing every interaction for deeper meaning. But they were the same as they'd always been, comfortable, affectionate in their quiet way. My father would come up behind my mother while she was cooking and kiss the top of her head, and she'd lean back into him just slightly the way plants lean towards sunlight. They'd sit on the porch in the evenings after dinner, not always talking, just existing together in the same space. Sometimes they'd hold hands. Sometimes they'd read separate books. Sometimes they'd just watch the street, commenting occasionally on neighbours passing by or the quality of the sunset. It looked like love. It felt like love. But was it enough? Had it ever been enough for her? Did she think about James, whoever he was? Did she wonder what her life would have been like if she'd chosen differently? I started having dreams about the wedding that never was. In my dreams, my mother would be standing at the altar in her ivory dress, and there would be two men waiting for her, my father steady and smiling, and a shadow figure I couldn't quite see, who I knew was James. In the dreams, she'd walk down the aisle and just keep walking, passing both of them, walking right out the church doors into some unknown future. I'd wake up sweating, my heart racing, relief flooding through me when I realised it was just a dream. 2 months after I found the letter, my grandmother died. Mom's mother, the woman who'd raised her in the same small town where we still lived, in the same house that was now ours. Grandma Ellen had been 92, sharp as a tack until the very end, still gardening and baking and keeping the most immaculate house I'd ever seen. She'd gone peacefully in her sleep, which everyone said was a blessing, though my mother cried like a piece of her had been torn away. The funeral was simple, quiet, attended by people who'd known my grandmother for 70, 80 years. People told stories about her garden, which had won awards from the garden club for 15 consecutive years. About her lemon cake, which she'd baked for every junction and community gathering since before I was born. About the way she'd single-handedly organised the church bazaar for 3 decades, keeping everything running with military precision and surprising warmth. My mother sat in the front pew, her face composed but her eyes red, my father's hand clasped firmly in hers. Marcus sat on her other side, his arm around her shoulders. I sat next to him, listening to the stories, watching my mother mourn the woman who'd taught her how to bake bread, how to arrange flowers, how to be the kind of woman everyone looked up to. After the service, while everyone was gathering at our house for the reception, helping themselves to casseroles and coffee and telling more stories about Grandma Ellen, I found my mother alone in her childhood bedroom upstairs. She was sitting on the edge of the narrow bed, still wearing her black dress, her hands folded in her lap. The room hadn't changed much since she'd lived there, still had the same floral wallpaper, roses and vines in faded pink and green, still had the same white curtains, sheer and delicate, still had the same bookshelf filled with old paperbacks and yearbooks, the same desk where she'd probably done her homework 30 years ago. "Mom," I said softly from the doorway, not wanting to startle her. She looked up, and I saw that she'd been crying. Not the fresh, dramatic tears of new grief, but the dried tracks of old sorrow, the kind that comes from places deeper than loss. Her eyes were distant, focused on something I couldn't see, something that existed only in memory. "Come sit with me," she said, patting the bed beside her. I sat. The mattress creaked under our combined weight, springs that had probably been there since my mother was my age. The sound was somehow comforting, familiar, even though I'd rarely been in this room before. This was my mother's past, the place where she'd become who she was, and I was sitting in the physical evidence of that becoming. "This room holds so many memories," she said, her voice distant. "I was so young here, so certain about everything. I thought I knew exactly how my life would unfold, like I could see the whole path stretched out in front of me. I felt the letter burning in my consciousness, that yellowed envelope with its faded blue ink that I'd read so many times I could recite it from memory. Did it unfold the way you thought?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. She was quiet for a long moment. Outside, I could hear the murmur of voices from downstairs, the sound of plates and coffee cups, life continuing around us even in the face of death. Someone laughed, then immediately stifled it, as if remembering they were at a wake. But Grandma Ellen would have wanted laughter. She'd always said that funerals were for the living, and the living should remember that life goes on. "No," my mother finally said. "Nothing ever does, not really. Life has a way of surprising you, of taking turns you never expected. But that's not always a bad thing." "What do you mean?" She turned to look at me then, really look at me, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never noticed before. Not sadness, exactly. More like acceptance. The kind that comes after years of carrying something heavy, years of learning how to distribute the weight so it doesn't break you. When I was 19, she began, her voice steady now, deliberate. I fell in love for the first time. His name was James. My breath caught. My heart started pounding so hard I was sure she could hear it. I didn't move, didn't speak, afraid that if I did, she'd stop, and I needed to hear this. I'd waited 2 months for this, even though I hadn't known I was waiting. He was everything I thought I wanted, romantic, intense, full of grand gestures and bigger dreams. He wrote me poetry. He'd show up my window at midnight to take me on adventures. We were going to leave this town, travel the world, live in New York or Paris or somewhere exciting, somewhere that wasn't here. She paused, smoothing her dress over her knees, her hands moving in that absent way people's hands move when they're remembering. He made me feel like I was the center of the universe, like nothing existed when we were together except the two of us. He had this way of looking at me that made me feel beautiful, important, like I mattered more than anything else in the world. When you're 19, that feeling is intoxicating. It's everything. I could picture it. My mother at 19, young and probably beautiful, caught up in the kind of romance that feels like destiny. It was so different from the woman I knew, the one who baked bread and arranged flowers and moved through life with such quiet certainty. But he was also volatile, she continued, her voice taking on a harder edge. When things were good, they were incredible. We'd stay up all night talking about philosophy and poetry and all the things we were going to do. But when they were bad, they were terrible. He had a temper. He'd get jealous if I talked to other people. He'd disappear for days without explanation, then show up with flowers and apologies like nothing had happened. He'd make promises he couldn't keep. He needed me in a way that felt flattering at 19 and suffocating at 20. I could barely breathe. This was my mother's story, the one she'd never told me, the one I'd never thought to ask about because I'd assumed her life began the day she married my father. We were together for almost 2 years, 2 years of highs and lows, of breaking up and getting back together, of dramatic fights and passionate reconciliations. It was exhausting, but I kept going back because I thought that's what love was supposed to be. Intense, consuming, all or nothing. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street below where cars were parked along both sides, funeral attendees filling our neighbourhood with their presence. My mother, your grandmother, she never liked him. She said he was trouble, that he'd break my heart. I thought she just didn't understand. I thought she was old-fashioned and stuck in her ways. We fought about it constantly. She wanted me to break up with him, and I was determined to prove her wrong. I thought about Grandma Ellen, who I'd always known as the sweet lady who baked lemon cake and told funny stories. It was strange to think of her arguing with my mother, being anything other than gentle and supportive. "What changed?" I asked softly. My mother turned from the window to face me. I started noticing things, the way he talked about my dreams as if they were silly, the way he wanted me to change things about myself, my friends, my clothes, the way I spent my time. He wanted me to be someone different, someone who existed only in relation to him, and I started to realize that the person I was becoming with him wasn't someone I liked. She came back to the bed, sat down beside me again. I broke up with him 6 months before I met your father. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done up to that point. James didn't take it well. He'd show up at my work. I was waitressing at the diner on Main Street back then. He'd show up at my house at all hours. He'd write me letters. She smiled sadly. So many letters, begging me to reconsider, telling me I was making a mistake, that what we had was special and I'd regret throwing it away. "And Dad?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. "Your father was different. I met him at the library. I was checking out books for a class I was taking at the community college. I was trying to finish my degree after dropping out during the worst of the James years. Your father was the assistant librarian. He helped me find what I was looking for, and we got to talking about books. He recommended a novel to me, Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. He said it was about a woman finding her own voice." She smiled at the memory. And it was different from the sad smile she'd had before. This one was warm, genuine, full of affection. We started talking every time I came to the library, just talking, nothing dramatic or intense. He was funny in a quiet way. He listened when I spoke, really listened, and remembered things I'd said. He didn't try to be impressive or make grand gestures. He was just present, solid, real. When did you know, I asked, that he was different from James? There was this one day, she said, her eyes distant again, but in a different way. About a month after we'd started seeing each other, I'd had a terrible day. Failed an exam, gotten yelled at by my boss at the diner, just one of those days where everything goes wrong. I called your father to cancel our plans because I was such a mess. And he said, "Okay, can I bring you dinner instead?" She laughed softly. He showed up with Chinese takeout and let me cry and complain for 2 hours. He didn't try to fix anything or give me advice or make it about him. He just sat with me while I fell apart, and then he helped me put myself back together. That's when I knew. Knew what? That this was different. With James, everything was about the intensity of the feeling. With your father, it was about the quality of the presence. James made me feel like I was drowning in emotion. Thomas, your father, made me feel like I was standing on solid ground for the first time in my life. When I was with him, I didn't have to be anything other than myself. I didn't have to perform or prove or chase. I could just be. She reached over and took my hand, her fingers warm and familiar. We got engaged 6 months after we met. Fast, I know, but when you've been through the kind of chaos I'd been through with James, you recognise peace when you find it. 3 days before our wedding, James sent me one final letter, begging me not to marry Thomas, telling me it was a mistake, that what we'd had was real, and I was throwing it away for something safe and boring. What did you do? My voice was barely a whisper now. I got married anyway. She squeezed my hand. And Clara, my darling girl, I have never regretted that choice. Not for a single day, not even for a single moment. But you kept the letter, I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. You kept it hidden in your wedding dress. Her eyes widened slightly. You found it. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I was just looking at the dress and it fell out and I... No. She shook her head, cutting off my apology. Don't apologise. I kept it because I wanted to remember, not James specifically, not that relationship or those feelings, but I wanted to remember the girl I was when I chose your father. I wanted to remember that I had a choice, and I made it consciously, deliberately, with full knowledge of what I was choosing and what I was leaving behind. She stood up, paced to the window again, then back to me. Love isn't always the lightning bolt, Clara. Sometimes it's the steady flame that keeps you warm through the winter. Sometimes it's the hand that holds yours through the dark times, not the voice that promises you'll never see darkness at all. James promised me passion and intensity and a life without boundaries. Your father promised me partnership and respect and a life built on trust. Tears were streaming down my face now, though I couldn't have said exactly why. Maybe relief that she didn't regret marrying my father. Maybe grief for the girl she'd been at 19, caught in something toxic and not knowing how to escape. Maybe gratitude that she'd found the wisdom to choose differently. I've loved your father every day of our marriage, she continued, her voice fierce now, passionate in a way I'd rarely heard. But it's not the love James promised. It's not all-consuming passion and dramatic declarations. It's quieter than that. It's him bringing me coffee in the morning without asking, the way he knows I like it. It's the way we can sit in silence and feel complete instead of uncomfortable. It's knowing that when I fall, he'll catch me, not because he needs me to need him, but because he wants me to fly. It's the way he supports my dreams instead of trying to reshape them. It's choosing each other every single day, even when it's not easy. She wiped my tears with her thumb, the gesture so tender it made me cry harder. The story we tell about love, the one in movies and books and songs, it's not always the whole truth. Real love, lasting love, it's built on smaller things. Trust, respect, showing up every day and choosing each other again. It's not less beautiful for being quieter, it's just different. It's deeper. It's the kind of love that lasts through decades, not just years. Through sickness and health, through struggle and joy, through all the ordinary moments that make up a life. I thought about all the times I'd watched them together looking for cracks, but I'd been looking for the wrong thing. I'd been expecting their love to look like fireworks when it had always been more like a hearth fire, constant, warming essential. The kind of fire you could depend on to still be burning when you woke up in the morning. "Did Dad ever know?" I asked. "About James?" I told him. Before we got married, he deserved to know. I showed him some of the letters, told him about that relationship and why it ended. I wanted him to know what he was signing up for, wanted him to understand that I came with history. "And he still married you?" She smiled. "He said everyone has a past." What mattered was that I was choosing our future. He said the fact that I'd been brave enough to leave a bad situation showed him who I really was. Someone who could make hard choices. Someone who valued herself enough to walk away from something that was hurting her. He said that's the person he wanted to build a life with. She sat back down beside me, put her arm around my shoulders. "I kept that letter, Clara, not because I was pining for what could have been. I kept it because it reminded me that I was strong enough to choose wisely, that I didn't just fall into this life, I built it deliberately. And on the hard days when marriage felt difficult, or when I was exhausted from raising you kids, or when money was tight and we were fighting about bills, I could look at that letter and remember, I chose this. I chose Thomas. I chose this life, and I would choose it again." We sat there together in her childhood bedroom in the house that held all her memories, and I finally understood. The letter wasn't a secret shame or a hidden regret. It was a testament to her strength, to her growth, to her ability to recognize the difference between intensity and intimacy, between passion that burns out and love that builds something lasting. That night, after everyone had left and the house was quiet again, after we'd washed all the dishes and put away all the casseroles and swept the floors and restored some semblance of order, I went up to my room and took the letter out of my backpack. I read it one more time. James's desperate words, his declarations of eternal love, his certainty that my mother was making a mistake. But now I read it differently. Now I could see the manipulation in it, subtle but there, the way he centered himself in her decision. The way he made it about his feelings, his needs, his certainty that he would wait for her. There was no acknowledgement of why she'd left, no understanding of what she actually needed. It was beautiful language wrapped around a fundamentally selfish message. My mother hadn't kept this letter because she loved James. She'd kept it because it proved she'd been strong enough to walk away from someone who loved her wrong. I folded it carefully and went downstairs. I found my mother in the kitchen, washing the last of the dishes from the reception. My father was drying, the two of them moving in the synchronized rhythm of people who'd done this together thousands of times. They weren't talking, just working together, and there was something beautiful in that. The way they could be together without needing to fill the silence. "Mom," I said, "I think this belongs to you." I held out the envelope. She dried her hands slowly on a dish towel, took it from me, and looked at it for a long moment. My father glanced over, saw what it was, and gave her a small nod, some communication between them that I couldn't fully decipher, but that seemed to say, "It's okay," or "Do what you need to do." Then she walked to the trash can, tore the letter in half, then in quarters, then into smaller pieces, and dropped them all inside. "Some things," she said, turning back to look at me, "we only keep until we're ready to let them go." I kept that letter for 23 years because I needed to remember. Now you know the story, and I don't need the letter anymore. The memory is enough. My father put his arm around her shoulders, and she leaned into him, that same gentle lean I'd seen 1,000 times before. But this time, I saw it differently. I saw the choice in it, the daily decision to be there, to lean, to trust. I saw the years of choosing each other, morning after morning, through ordinary days and extraordinary challenges. I saw the love that looked like home. I'm 29 now, 12 years since that day in the attic. 12 years since I found the letter that I thought would destroy my faith in love, but instead taught me what love really means. I'm getting married in 3 months. His name is Daniel, and he's nothing like the first man I loved, the one who set my world on fire with his intensity, his passion, his grand declarations that made me feel I was the most important person in the universe. That relationship lasted 8 months during my sophomore year of college. 8 months of emotional whiplash, of dramatic fights and passionate reconciliations, of feeling simultaneously alive and exhausted. When he broke up with me for the third time, though this time it stuck, I was devastated. I thought I'd never love anyone that intensely again, never feel that consuming fire. I was right, thank God. Daniel is steady, kind. He makes me laugh, not through elaborate jokes or performative humour, but through the quiet observation of life's absurdities. He holds me when I cry, without trying to fix whatever made me cry or make it about him. When we sit together in silence, it doesn't feel empty or awkward. It feels full, complete, like we're both exactly where we're supposed to be. He's an accountant, which sounds boring until you realise that he finds genuine joy in helping small businesses figure out their taxes, in making sense of chaos, in bringing order to things that seem overwhelming. He loves crossword puzzles and hiking and documentaries about space. He remembers how I take my coffee. He calls his mother every Sunday. He cries during movies where dogs die and isn't embarrassed about it. He's not dramatic or intense or full of grand gestures. But he shows up every single day. He shows up. When I told him about my mother's story, about James and the letter and the choice she made, he listened carefully. Then he said, "I'm glad she chose the way she did. Otherwise, I wouldn't get to marry you." It was simple, but it was perfect. That's Daniel. Simple in the best way. Uncomplicated, direct. Sometimes I think about James, whoever he was, wherever he is now. I wonder if he ever found what he was looking for, or if he's still chasing that lightning bolt love he was so certain my mother was throwing away. I wonder if he learned that intensity isn't the same as intimacy, that needing someone isn't the same as loving them well. But mostly, I think about my parents, about my mother's steady footsteps and my father's quiet strength, about the way they built a life together, brick by brick, choice by choice, day by ordinary day. I think about the coffee he brings her every morning, the way she still puts his favourite meal on the table when he's had a hard week, the way they still dance in the living room on their anniversary to "The Way You Look Tonight." I think about how the most profound love stories aren't always the loudest ones, how sometimes the greatest act of love is showing up with coffee in the morning, how choosing someone once isn't enough. You have to keep choosing them again and again through the boring parts and the hard parts and the parts where the lightning has long since faded. My mother was right. Real love is different than what they show in the movies. It's quieter, steadier, less about grand gestures and more about small, consistent acts of care. It's not the dramatic declaration in the rain. It's remembering to pick up milk on the way home because you know you're running low. It's not the passionate speech about eternal love. It's holding someone's hand through a difficult doctor's appointment. It's not the expensive surprise vacation. It's doing the dishes without being asked because you know your partner is exhausted. It's the weight of white lace, wreath or ivory to be precise, carrying not just a moment of decision but years and years of choices made in its wake. It's coming home at the end of every day and knowing without question that you're exactly where you're meant to be. My mother is helping me pick out my wedding dress next week. We're going together, just the two of us, to a small boutique in the next town over that specialises in vintage-inspired gowns. I don't think I'll choose white. I think I'll choose ivory. That shade that's already lived a little, that carries warmth instead of pristine perfection. The shade that acknowledges that both Daniel and I come to this marriage with history, with past relationships and lessons learned and scars that have healed into wisdom. And I won't hide any letters in the bodice. I won't need to, because I'm not marrying Daniel despite my doubts. I'm marrying him because of my certainty. Because I've already seen what lightning looks like, and I've already felt what it means when it strikes and then fades. I know the difference now between passion that burns hot and fast and love that glows steady and long. I know which one keeps you warm through winter. I know which one I choose. On my mother's last birthday, her 52nd, I gave her a small silver frame with a quote I'd found while scrolling through a poetry collection. It said, "The best love is the kind that awakens the soul and makes us reach for more, that plants a fire in our hearts and brings peace to our minds." She cried when she opened it, which wasn't like her. She's not usually one for emotional displays, but she hugged me tight and whispered, "You understand now." And I did. I understood that the best love isn't the one that sets you on fire. It's the one that gives you both fire and peace, passion and comfort, excitement and stability. The kind of love that challenges you to grow while accepting exactly who you are in this moment. She hung the frame in her bedroom, right next to a photo of her and my father from their 20th anniversary. In the picture, they're not posed dramatically or gazing intensely into each other's eyes. They're just standing together on a beach somewhere. I think it was a weekend trip to the coast they took without us kids. His arm around her waist, both of them smiling at something outside the frame. Probably Marcus making a joke, or me tripping over my own feet, or just some moment of ordinary joy. Something real. That's what love looks like, I realise now. Not the ivory dress and the perfect ceremony, not the letters full of desperate declarations, but the 23 years that came after. The coffee in the morning, the steady presence, the choice, made new with every sunrise. The weight of white lace isn't in the fabric itself, it's in everything you carry forward from the moment you put it on. And my mother? She carried that weight with grace, not because she was perfect, not because she never doubted, not because she never loved before my father, but because she chose wisely, loved deeply, and built a life on the foundation of something real. That's the inheritance she gave me, not a fantasy of perfect love that arrives fully formed and requires no effort, not a belief in soulmates who complete us, or fate that brings us to the right person, but a blueprint for real love, the kind that requires daily choice, conscious effort, mutual respect, and the wisdom to know the difference between intensity and intimacy. And I intend to carry that weight just as gracefully as she did. Daniel and I are already talking about the small choices. Whose coffee maker we'll keep when we merge our apartments, whether we'll alternate holidays with each other's families or create new traditions, how we'll handle finances and household chores, and all the mundane decisions that actually form the foundation of a life together. These conversations aren't romantic in the traditional sense, but there's something deeply intimate about them, about building a life consciously and deliberately, about choosing partnership over passion. My mother told me once, in another late-night conversation after I'd introduced her to Daniel, the most romantic thing your father ever did wasn't propose to me on one knee with a ring. It was sitting down with me before we got married and asking, what do you need to feel safe and loved in a marriage? And then actually listening to my answer. And then spending the next 25 years making sure I had those things. I asked Daniel that same question last month. We were sitting on his couch, eating takeout Chinese food and watching a documentary about the solar system, about as unromantic a setting as you could imagine. But when I asked him, what do you need to feel safe and loved in a marriage? He paused the documentary, set down his food and thought about it seriously. I need honesty, he finally said. Even when the truth is hard. I need to know that you'll tell me when something's wrong instead of letting it build up. I need affection, not constant, but regular. I need to feel like we're a team, like we're facing life together instead of competing or keeping score. And I need space sometimes to decompress and recharge without feeling guilty about it. Then he asked me the same question, and I told him, I need consistency. I need to know you'll still be there when the exciting newness wears off. I need emotional safety, to be able to be messy and imperfect without fear of judgment. I need intellectual partnership, someone who challenges my thinking and wants to grow with me. And I need to maintain my individual identity, to be Clara, who happens to be married to Daniel, not just Daniel's wife. We wrote all of it down. We have a document on both our phones titled Our Needs, and we refer back to it when we're making decisions, when we're fighting, when we're navigating challenges. It's not romantic in the way movies portray romance, but it's love. Real, practical, sustainable love. That's what my mother's story taught me. That the grand gestures and passionate declarations are easy. What's hard and what's worth it is the daily choice. The conscious decision to show up, to do the work, to keep choosing your partner, even when it would be easier not to. So there it is, the story of a letter I never should have read, and the truth that set me free. The story of my mother, who I thought was a saint, discovering she was something better. She was human, flawed, and incredibly beautifully wise. If this story touched something in your heart, maybe you understand what I've learned, that the quietest loves are often the strongest ones. That choosing someone every day is more powerful than falling for them once. That the real fairy tale isn't about the glass slipper or the kiss that breaks the curse. It's about the ordinary magic of two people building a life together, one small choice at a time. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever discovered something about someone you love that changed how you saw them? Or maybe you've learned the difference between passion and lasting love? Have you found yourself drawn to intensity, only to discover that what you really needed was consistency? Or perhaps you're in the middle of learning these lessons right now, figuring out what kind of love you want to build your life on. Leave a small whisper in the comments below. Share your story, your insights, your questions. Sometimes the most profound realizations come from hearing how others have walked similar paths, how they've navigated the complex terrain of love and choice and growth. And if you'd like to listen to more stories like this, stories about the messy, beautiful reality of being human, about the choices that shape us and the wisdom we gain from our mistakes, just stay close and subscribe. Until next time, this is Olivia, whispering to your heart. Remember, the best love isn't the one that consumes you. It's the one that grounds you, challenges you, and chooses you every single day.